What's up, everybody? My name is Godzi, and welcome back to some more Umineko When They Cry Questions Arc. Last episode, we finished the main part of Chapter 4, and I think my volume... Nope, my volume's fine. Okay. Yeah, we beat Chapter 4, and holy shit, it was kind of crazy. Angie sacrificed herself so Batware and Beatrice can continue their game. It's probably a shitty description of what actually happened, but... it happened, and it was really, really cool. But we still have the tea party, and this will probably be the last episode, unless this tea party is incredibly long. Which, since it's the last one, it very well might be. So, let's just jump right into it. It's gotta be some, like, big revelation right at the very end, right? Oh, I see. The second day, October 5th, 1986. Interesting. So is this just a continuation of Chapter 4? In a way? I mean, it's still part of it. Midnight. Oh, God. I don't have a clue what's going on. It just skipped ahead to, like, 10 p.m. of the next day. Please, someone explain in a way even I can understand what happened yesterday. I was in the kitchen of the mansion, grabbing some food without permission. If you open up that massive business class refrigerator, you can find anything. You can eat and drink as much as you like. Even if the typhoon didn't clear up for a week, I'd have more than enough to eat. With wine in one hand, I was helping myself to some dry-cured ham. I wonder just how expensive this wine and ham are. You ingredients are out of luck, too. If only you'd had Goda to cook you, you could have been reborn as much more incredible food. I looked at the clock. Very soon it would be 2400. October 5th, the second day, would end. The insane October 4th, yesterday, seemed like a lie. That's how much nothing had happened after that test thing. What happened to Maria? Nothing happened. No phone call came, and no letters came. No person came, and no one attacked me. Nothing happened at all. I want to start demanding a refund on all the time and energy that tension stole from me. Because after that, for an entire day, a full 24 hours, nothing happened. So surely, nothing's gonna happen now. Big doubt. A full 24 hours ago, Beatrice called me to the spot in front of the mansion's entrance. There, I was given a strange test to determine the successor to the headship or whatever. I gave a serious answer in my own way, but it somehow hadn't meshed with the other side. Beatrice got pissed for no reason and fell silent. I yelled at her to try and say something, but she gave no answer. When I asked where Maria was, she just told me to go to the chapel and left. To tell the truth, it was an anticlimax. No matter what kind of weird test you give, at least tell me whether I've passed or failed. Are you trying to say, thanks for coming, your results will be mailed to you later, or something? Quit messing with me. Anyway, I then headed to the chapel. After failing their tests, both George and Jessica were killed. I couldn't let Maria get killed too. Also, I might get a chance to catch some person trying to kill her. As a little kid, I often heard from Jessica that you'd get in trouble if you went near the chapel. So I'd never been there, but I at least knew where it was. I couldn't find any trace of a person there, but there was a key bundle lying in front of the door. I thought this might be someone telling me to open the door, but after trying all the keys, I found that none of them fit. Interesting. I also called Maria's name, but there was no answer whatsoever. I searched around the chapel, but there was a limit to what I could do in the pitch black with just a flashlight. I realized that this key bundle might be a set of master keys, which could make it possible to open the door to the mansion. I found no sign of Maria, so I returned to the mansion. The mansion was wrapped in silence, and in a horrible stench. However, it's amazing how good humans are at adapting. The inside of the mansion must still be wrapped up in that smell. However, I grew completely used to it and stopped minding it. It didn't seem any worse than any old house where someone had burnt some meat. At first I was bewildered by the stench, but I decided to head to the dining hall for the time being. Oh yeah, duh. Oh, and found those corpses that were so pitiful. Goda and the rest had hesitated to speak of them in detail. Okay, so who was in here? Yeah, the first Twilight. Okay. Let's read them in order of how they apparently died. Natsuhi. Her corpse was found in the dining hall. About half of her head was destroyed. It's probably reasonable to assume that she was murdered with a powerful gun or something similar. However, the witnesses don't believe she was killed with a gun. Then it was Rudolph. That's basically the same thing. His corpse was found in the dining hall. About half his head was destroyed. It's probably reasonable to assume that he was murdered with a powerful gun or something similar. However, the witnesses don't believe he was killed with a gun. Hideyoshi, that is the exact same. Genji, it's the exact same. Eva, it's the exact same, but she instead of he. And Rosa, the exact same. Okay. The wounds, yep, they're all half their head. Go figure. It was the remains of Aunt Natsuhi and the others who'd become the first victims. Half of each head had been completely split open, and it was so gruesome that even without knowing a thing about examining corpses, I could say that they were 100% dead. And on top of that, the remaining halves of their faces were left like normal, so it was even easy to identify them. Really convenient corpses these were. In addition to those 6 bodies was one more. Oh, what? The 7th corpse was Maria. Maria's dead too? Oh, no wounds. Her corpse was found in the dining hall. Battler wasn't able to make out any wounds in particular, so we assumed that she was killed by some kind of poison. The most peaceful form of invitation to the Golden Land. Okay, then. She lay next to Aunt Rosa, as though sweeping alongside her. I cried. At the death of an innocent young girl. And at the cruel way my dad and the rest had died. I raced through the mansion swinging the hat stand spear, yelling, "Come out here, bastard!" Oh, he's looking for Kinzo, isn't he? But I couldn't find any trace of anyone else. Well, Kinzo's dead, at least. Thinking they might be planning to hide somewhere and attack me from behind, I went around searching for hiding places, sometimes growing more cautious, and sometimes intentionally letting my guard down in various ways. But in the end, not even a kitten appeared. Then morning came. My tension and fatigue combined with my drowsiness, making for the worst kind of dawn. Is he just gonna go around and find all the different bodies then? Humans are pretty incredible. Even when a murderer might have been hiding somewhere, we prioritize drowsiness and fatigue over our own lives. By that time I was starting to feel pretty ridiculous. After all, for a full 6 hours before dawn, I'd walked around the mansion, yelling at the culprits to show themselves. You're probably the only person alive on the island, Battler. My search had been a careful one, and I tired myself out, and let my guard down. Even so, no one came to attack me. Basically, I lost patience with them and figured they could do whatever the hell they wanted. The boat won't come until the typhoon passes. They said on TV that it won't pass until tomorrow, so I've got another full day today. Lazing about lost its interest. And even though I knew it would probably make the police mad, I decided to play detective a bit. First was the dining hall, where the very first murder had occurred. So he is just gonna go around and search. The 6 who had been killed in the beginning really were pitiful. The weapon used was probably a gun. Maybe their heads were split by something powerful, like a magnum bullet or a shotgun. It was a reasonable theory to hold. Yeah. Compared to that, the 7th corpse, Maria, had died in a much better and cleaner way. At a glance, I could see no external wounds and didn't understand how she'd been killed. But by her mouth were traces of bubbles that she might have spat out. And it looked like a typical death by poisoning that you might see in a TV drama. Wasn't Maria called out to the chapel and given a test? So why was she in the corpse-filled dining hall lying next to her mother, dead? It's a good point. Even if the cause of death was poison, who gave it to her? Her clothes weren't disturbed at all. It's hard to imagine that she was forcefully pushed down and given an injection of poison. It's probably better to assume that she was given a capsule of poison or something and made to swallow it. But compared to the scattered and violently mutilated corpses in this room, Maria's corpse was too clean. If they had a gun, they only needed to pull the trigger. But poisoning, whether by having her drink it or by an injection, would take a lot more effort. Considering the culprit's brutal nature, you'd think Maria's death alone was given special treatment. Why was only Maria given a sweep-like death? True, being killed is always a pitiful thing, but for some reason, Maria's death alone seemed very courteous to me. Both of Maria's hands were joined on her chest, as though the dead person had put them there herself. Did Maria do that herself before dying? Isn't this usually something done by someone else after the person dies? As though sweeping with her mother, whose head was half crushed, Maria dozed in peace. For some reason, that contrast really bugged me. Including the direct cause, it's probably safe to say that Maria's death is shrouded in mystery. And more than anything else, the biggest mystery of this dining hall was the pitfalls. The pitfalls that both Uncle Krause's group and Goda's had mentioned. After the first 6 were killed, 5 more fell through pitfalls and were captured. What are pitfalls? Those things that suddenly open and you fall through them, right? The room had a solid floor with a carpet that looked dignified, if a bit worn out. No matter how you looked at it, it was a single piece. If a pitfall had opened up, there would have to be a seam just in that place. And if there had been some trick like a pitfall, wouldn't it creak when you walked on it? No matter how much I walked around, feeling the carpet, I just couldn't imagine that a pitfall was hidden here. Yeah, that is weird. Anyway, it'd be one thing if a single person fell, but a full 5 people did. By putting together everyone's stories, each one of them had fallen from a different location. So at the very least, there had to be 5 separate places with pitfalls. So what does this mean? Was this room actually made with pitfalls across the entire floor, so by pushing a button, you could open up a pitfall in the location of your choice? Some kind of contraption like that? It definitely can't be a pitfall, since they were put in a cell underneath Kuadorian, right? And this isn't Kuadorian. Unless the murder actually happened in Kuadorian and there are pitfalls there in Kuadorian's dining hall, and the bodies were moved back here. But I don't think that makes much sense. That kind of ridiculous mechanism would be surprising even in a ninja mansion. But if Dad and the rest had heard about this, I wonder if they'd say I wouldn't put it past Grandfather to do it, to make it. At any rate, I didn't learn anything more from the dining hall. Do the pitfalls not exist? Or do they exist but I just can't find them, amateur that I am? I can't say for sure. Since they claim that the pitfalls were there, I can't ignore them even if I can't find them. The next ones to be killed were Jessica and George. I discovered George when I'd been called out for my test. He had been called out to the arbor in the rose garden, and probably shot in the forehead with a gun. Well, his head wasn't destroyed, so it was probably a different type of gun, right? Probably the same way Natsuhi was killed in the first game. Jessica had been called to her own room on the 2nd floor of the mansion. The door to her room was locked, but that wasn't a problem at all since I had a master key. And there she is. Inside the room, it was horrible, but after the dining hall I was used to corpses, so I built up a bit of an immunity. The phone receiver was loose and dangling. Oh, there's blood on the wall too up there. Had she been killed while still on the phone with me? Very likely. Jessica was leaning against the wall right next to it, with half of her head split open. She's kind of laying on the ground instead, but... Oh yeah, fuck, I forgot it does that with CGs. Have to wait to get off the CG before I can read that. As far as I could tell by glancing at the scene, it looked as though she'd been killed while on the phone. In that case, had the culprit been right there before her eyes? I hadn't gotten that impression when listening to Jessica's voice over the phone. Okay, here we go. Oh, nope, that still counts as a CG, apparently. I'm pretty sure Jessica said they got me. It's probably best to assume that she'd already received a fatal wound at the time of the phone call. That's right, and she also said this. When you come, Battler, I'll be a corpse with half of its head split open. Yes, that's what she said. From what I could tell by looking at Jessica's corpse, there were no wounds on her other than the damage to her head. Could she have had an injury serious enough to make her prepared for death, and then died halfway through the phone call? But the way she talked on the phone made me think that she'd escaped harm for the time being. You shouldn't be able to have a casual conversation over a phone if the culprit's right before your eyes. So did the culprit come in partway through the phone call and kill Jessica? No, that can't be right. After all, this room was locked. Wait, that doesn't tell me anything. If the culprit stole a master key from one of the victims, locking the door would be meaningless. But she had no external wounds other than her head. In that case, should I assume that the fatal wound she was prepared to die from and the actual external wound that damaged her head were two different things? And that both of them were made to be the same part of the body? In other words, Jessica was struck severely to the head and received an incredibly bad wound. Then she called me and either lost consciousness or died while on the phone. Then the culprit came and damaged her head again. Something like that. Oh, gray motorcycle gunman. Oh wait, this doesn't count as a CG. Okay, Jessica. Ushiromiyas Jessica. Her corpse was found in her room on the second floor of the mansion. About half of her head was destroyed. It's probably reasonable to assume that she was murdered with a powerful gun or something similar. She was smashed by her own attack due to George's counter-offensive specialized barrier. By her own attack? I thought with that magical explanation it was just like George kicked her head open. And that was a brand of humiliation, right? After being called to this room, Jessica was attacked by the culprit and received a serious injury. Then the culprit thought she'd been killed and went away for the time being. But Jessica miraculously started breathing again and called me with what would become her dying message. Then why wouldn't she tell us who killed her? Then the culprit realized that they'd failed to kill her and rushed back to deliver the final blow after Jessica fell unconscious from massive blood loss. Right. That seems to add up, more or less. Except for how Jessica was able to accurately predict the nature of that final blow. How quiet is this gun to the point where Battler couldn't have heard it from the guest house? Unless the typhoon is incredibly loud, which would also make sense, I guess. And there was one more thing that bugged me about the phone call from Jessica. Jessica had said this. George is done for too. That was an instant death. She said it almost as though she'd witnessed George being killed. But while you certainly could see the rose garden from the window in Jessica's room, and you could even see the roof of the arbor where George had been summoned, it was very far away. Add on the fact that it was the night of a typhoon, and it's very hard to imagine that she was able to witness everything that happened by the arbor from this window. Right. And more than anything else, Jessica left before George. So she shouldn't have known that George's test took place by the arbor. Why did Jessica know that George had been killed? That is quite the mystery. Also, during my search of the entire mansion, I found Kyrie's corpse as well. Yeah, she was in one of the random guest rooms. There she is. Oh, interesting. Must have been the same weapon as... Yeah, it's the same, wound for the most part, too. Her corpse was found in a guest room deep within the mansion. There was a single hole right in the center of her forehead. It's probably reasonable to assume she was shot with a gun or something similar. A demon stake was buried in the hole in her forehead, but it's hard to imagine this was the cause of death. I didn't miss. I missed on purpose to tease her. Yeah, okay, 410, you can say that, but... Okay, so she was the fourth Twilight. I guess we already know that the Order of the Twilights doesn't mean the Order of Death, obviously. Because Kinzo was the fourth Twilight in the first game, and if he was already dead since before the game started, then obviously he was dead before the first and second Twilights, despite being the fourth. It was in one of the old guest rooms at the back of the first floor. In the past, before the construction of the guest house, the relatives had spent the night in these. Kyrie's situation matched Jessica's perfectly. She'd probably been killed during her phone call with me. The receiver was hanging untidily, and Kyrie lay crumpled in that corner. But the way she had been killed was very different from Jessica. Her head wasn't smashed. Instead, a stake with an occult design was buried into her forehead. It was so gruesome, so I pulled it out. Gross, don't do that. After pulling it, I realized that this might get me into trouble with the police later. So a little too late, I set it down by Kyrie's side. Its tip was sharp and stained with enough blood that it must have penetrated fully to the brain. I didn't know what kind of metal it was made of, but it was about as heavy as a paperweight. Certainly if you were stabbed all out with something like this, it might cause a terrible wound. I probably knew what that stake meant. It's one of those. The style of killing from the fourth Twilight onwards in the Witch's Epitaph. It's probably that gouge with a stake and kill thing. It doesn't say with a stake, though. It just says, like, gouge the head and kill, right? However, a human skull is very firm. No matter how much someone mustered their strength, could it really have been pierced so neatly? Yeah, no. No. By my reasoning, the stake wasn't the cause of death, but had just been used to damage the corpse after death. She was probably killed with a gun or something, like George. And the stake had been stuck into the hole left by the gun. Thinking of it that way makes it easier to accept. But then why didn't he hear a gunshot through the phone, right? But was Kyrie really killed with a gun? As she said on the phone, even though she was holed up inside a locked room, Kyrie was being attacked. In fact, this room had been locked. Also, she mentioned a golden thread or something flying in and attacking her. In fact, there were 4 places around Kyrie's corpse with holes that could have been caused by some kind of attack. But a golden thread attacked her through the keyhole? I looked at the door from Kyrie's perspective. If it had been one of those old keyholes you see in old mystery movies, where you can peek through to the other side, then it would have clearly been possible to stick something through it. But even though the doors in this mansion were old-fashioned, the locks were the familiar, average cylinder style that you could find in any normal house. In other words, they weren't constructed in a way that would let you penetrate through them. So no matter how thin an object you might try to stick through the keyhole, it's unthinkable that something penetrated through from the outside and attacked. A cylinder lock. And a keyhole? But despite that, Kyrie definitely said that something like a golden thread had flown in through the keyhole. So, if there's actually no opening between the 2 sides of the cylinder lock, then that just completely contradicts the fact that the Chester sisters' arrows can just go through any opening, because that's not an opening in the first place. Spun around while aiming for her and attacked her. A golden thread attacking through a keyhole. I couldn't understand what it meant at all. Obviously it's a lie. She was probably coerced by the culprit to actually say that. Because, like, spitballing here, if George, the character I'm most suspicious of for all 4 games so far, if George was the culprit, he could have been standing there with a gun. Maybe it has a silencer. That would explain why Battler wouldn't hear the gunshots. And he forced her to say all these lies about magic and stuff, right? That would only make sense. That's the only way it makes sense, because why else would there be a golden thread sticking through the keyhole? But even so, Kyrie probably predicted that I wouldn't be able to understand all this. And it wasn't just Kyrie. Jessica said it over the phone too. No, since the very beginning, from the time with Goda and Kumasawa and got the phone call from Uncle Krause's group, everyone has said the same consistent thing. Grandfather summoned witches and demons, and is killing people with magic. They'd been shown that right before their eyes. These weren't tricks or fakes. There was no choice but to believe it. With one voice, they had all said that. When the mystery woman calling herself Beatrice appeared, even I had pretty much believed that she was a real witch and might start summoning goat monsters right and left. However, after being left alone for a whole day, my feeling of tension had faded completely. I was now able to think that something so stupid definitely couldn't be true. Did they lose their heads a little in an extraordinary situation where their lives were exposed to danger, and mistakenly think that a witch was attacking them with magic? But multiple people gave the same kind of testimony, and on top of that, none of their opinions conflicted each other. If it had just been a single statement, I'd be able to suspect that they just didn't see what they thought they saw. But doing that now is pretty difficult. Right. Then right next to the back door, I found Uncle Krause with his head half smashed. Did it just do the thing? Yes, it sure did. Ushiromiyas Krause. His corpse was found in a guest room deep within the mansion. It was in a guest room? I thought he said it was by the back door. About half of his head was destroyed. It's probably reasonable to assume that he was murdered with a powerful gun or something similar. A demon stake was buried into the damaged area. No one can escape from the Chester's golden arrows. So, what? He was gouged into head... buried into a hole in her forehead. Demon stake was buried into the damaged area. His head. So what, we have 2 fourth Twilights? Even though he'd escaped the dungeon of Kuwadorian and somehow made it this far by a secret underground passage, he had been killed. Buried into the gruesome cross-section of his half-crushed head was a stake with an occult design, like the one that had been buried into Kyrie's forehead. And in this situation, it was very hard to imagine that the stake was the weapon used. He had been killed with a powerful gun like the six in the dining hall, and after death, had been jabbed with a stake like Kyrie. I wonder if the golden threads that Kyrie spoke of attacked Uncle Kraus too. Does there exist some kind of tool, like an endoscope, that's very thin but can be removed about at will, and that can also attack people? No way, I've never heard of anything like that. But even so, if this fact had been revealed to one of the relatives, maybe they'd say I wouldn't put it past grandfather to make it. Since I can't deny the existence of Golden Thread X that can be moved at will and attack people, I can either accept that this mysterious weapon exists, or else I'll have to accept that this was a murder committed with magic. Fair, I guess. Assuming that they're telling the truth about this golden thread thing, it's the only thing that makes sense. To find the next corpse, I had to go out through the back door and search around outside a bit. Which would be Shannon, Nanjo, and Cannon, right? Behind the mansion, in the wild-grown bushes that were almost swallowed up by the forest, there was something like an old well. Ah. And right next to it were Dr. Nanjo and Shannon's corpses. Oh, that's right, because Cannon fell down through it, didn't he? Alright, Nanjo and... Ah, shit, me stupu. Huh. Both corpses had their heads smashed. And though they weren't stuck in, there were stakes lying right next to each damaged head. Each corpse was atrocious, but having to look directly at Shannon's lovely face, which had been half blown away, was very painful. Then there was the well. I'd heard that inside it was a secret underground passage to the mysterious mansion Kuwadorian. By this time, I'd begun to think that Beatrice and her accomplices might have used this underground passage and left for Kuwadorian. Even though there had been apparently at least 10 of them, I hadn't seen a trace of anyone. It seemed very likely that they'd already escaped to a different location. There's the typhoon. They can't go out to sea. It goes the same for the forest. There's no way they could traverse such a deep, uncultivated forest on foot. Oh wait, I forgot. Yeah. Once the CG's gone, I can read this. So, Shannon was killed beforehand. Oh wow. Her corpse was found behind the mansion. About half of her head was destroyed. It's probably reasonable to assume that she was murdered with a powerful gun or something similar. A demon stake had fallen near the body. The witnesses at least realized that the stake wasn't what killed her. Are they not following the epitaph properly? Because the stake is... We haven't had a stake in the chest, stomach, leg, or knee yet, right? And then Nanjo. His corpse was found behind the mansion. About half of his head was destroyed. It's probably reasonable to assume that he was murdered with a powerful gun or something similar. A demon stake had fallen near the body. So yeah, yet again. It's just the forehead again. In that case, they had only one place to go. The mysterious hidden mansion, Kuwadorian. Through the secret underground passage at the bottom of the well. By this time, I had entirely lost my fear of being killed if I happened to come across the enemy. Don't fuck with me. This time I'll storm into your mansion. Where would Kinzo's body be? What the hell? Damn it. The old well had a firm cover on it. The cover was an iron grill. The gaps between the bars were perhaps 20 centimeters across. You could peer inside, but it really wasn't something a human could pass through. If I hadn't known better, I wouldn't have thought it anything more than a simple cover to prevent falls. But from what Kyrie had told me, I knew that its purpose was to prevent intruders from entering the secret underground passage in its depths. But the cover was extremely firm and rigid, and no matter how much I pushed or pulled, I couldn't even get close to opening it. I couldn't find any obvious lock. It might be sealed by some mechanism. But no matter how much I investigated it, I couldn't find anything to release it. The biggest piece of information Kyrie had tried to give me, gambling her final moments, was the underground passage in this well. Don't think I'll be stopped by something like this cover. I'll smash it to bits. I'll search for a tool. I had an idea. After all, I'd seen the various tools in the gardening shed when we locked Goda and Kumasawa in there. So you're going back there then? Are they finally going to be considered dead then? But the shutter to the gardening shed was locked. On top of that, the key was with Goda, who was dead on the inside. In other words, this gardening shed was a closed room. There's no way to open it from the outside. In that case, I've got to break the shutter. There has to be a tool for that somewhere. Kinda feels like I'm going in circles here. Then, while searching for that, I learned that the source of the stench that had permeated the mansion this whole time was the underground boiler room. This is probably where Kinzo is, then. The boiler room was dimly lit, humid, smelled horrible, and on top of all that was incredibly creepy. But there were several large tools there, and I managed to find a fire hatchet and some massive wire cutters. And Grandfather's corpse. Kinzo has been in the boiler room. Burned to a crisp every time, right? Is he burned to death? He is. His body was found as a burnt corpse in the underground boiler's incinerator. No evidence of a struggle was found inside the incinerator, so it's probably reasonable to assume that he was burned after his murder. Dust to dust, ashes to ashes, the dead to the dead. Okay. So, it's always been the boiler room. He was never found dead in the boiler room in the second game, but it's reasonable to assume that that probably did happen, as he was dead in the boiler room in the first game, and in the third, and now in the fourth also. So, what the heck? It's always there, and he's always burned to death. He's definitely been... Yeah, Kinzo's definitely been dead since before the start of all 4 games. Because, seriously, that's the only thing that makes sense at this point. In which case, the second and third games don't really matter too much, but the first and fourth games matter quite a bit regarding Kinzo. Actually, no, the second game does have a little bit to it. It makes Kraus and Natsuhi a lot more suspicious, especially with the first game, because Kinzo's disappearance from the study and all that. Natsuhi went up there, said that he was there, but then Natsuhi and Eva went up there, and he wasn't there, the receipt was still in the door. If Kinzo was never in there to begin with, then that would make sense. But then why would Natsuhi still lie about Kinzo being there? Unless she has some reason. I don't think it means she's the culprit, but still, that's quite a problem. And with the second game, it makes Shannon and Genji a little more suspicious, because I strictly remember those two going to Kinzo's study at one point. But if Kinzo was already dead, then that makes it a bit of a problem. And then, of course, with the fourth game, Kinzo was apparently the one who trapped everybody. But if he was already dead, then who trapped everybody? No, strictly speaking, I should probably say that I found a burnt corpse of a person who was probably Grandfather. Someone's corpse had been stuffed into the blazing fires of the boiler. However, by coincidence, I was able to notice the number of toes on the corpse, go figure. Both feet had 6 toes. That's right, I think I heard it from Dad some time long ago. Something about Grandfather having polydactyly, with extra toes. According to old Ushiromiya family tradition, it seems that those with extra fingers or toes had some kind of good fortune and were treated as a good omen. And because of that, Grandfather was selected to be the successor or something. But I wonder if I can be certain this is Grandfather's body just from the number of toes. After all, Grandfather was supposed to be the leader of the group of culprits. I didn't have a clue why you'd get stuffed into a boiler in a place like this and die. A mysterious corpse, burning and spitting out a terrible stench amid the flames. If it really was Grandfather, did that mean that the leader of the group of culprits wasn't Grandfather, but that Beatrice after all? Grandfather was used because he was convenient, and was then thrown away? Unfortunately, it didn't look like I'd be given a chance to hear Grandfather's side of the story. Yeah, he's kinda dead. Now that I had obtained a tool, I thought about rushing to take on the cover to the well, but I decided to break the shutter to the gardening shed first. I had plenty of time to kill anyway. I figured I should check on the condition of Goda and Kumasawa's corpses. And they're dead, of course, even though we already know that. I hit the shutter with the hatchet, breaking into it, stuck the wire cutter into the crack, and scissored it around, opening up a hole. Then I faced Goda and Kumasawa's corpses once more. Okay, now they're dead, for sure. As a result, I learned a new fact. First, they had not died by being hung by the neck. Both of their feet were solidly on the floor. Really? And on both of their foreheads were signs that they had been shot with a gun. The loop seemed longer than a normal noose. On top of that, the length was different on each to match the height of each person. In other words, the lengths had been adjusted so that both Goda, who was tall, and Kumasawa, who was short, had their feet solidly but barely on the ground. Oh, so they're a little bit lifted. And also, while the ropes carried both of their weights as their heads lolled, both of them had some slack below their knees. This meant that if they stood up with these loops around their necks, there would have been some extra length. In other words, these loops wouldn't have been that great for hanging people. The direct cause of death was probably a shot to the head. It was gruesome. Their insides were still dripping out from those gaping holes, staining their faces a deep red. So they were also shot. It's probably best to assume that they were then hung, pulled up, and left exposed like that. Okay then. Goda. His corpse was found in the Rose Garden storehouse. It's assumed that he was hung by the neck after being shot in the forehead. They put ropes around their own necks. That can be a pretty interesting experience now and then. Kumasawa, her corpse was found in the Rose Garden storehouse. It's assumed that she was hung by the neck after being shot in the forehead. As long as I could construct the closed room murder, nothing else mattered. So that just leaves Cannon, who he hasn't found yet, but is at the bottom of the well. If they'd been shot with a gun, they would probably have been lying down on the floor. If that had been the case, you wouldn't have been able to tell they were dead even if you peeked through the window. Oh, that's the window up there. That's a fucking real tiny window. Yeah, for sure no one can fit through there, especially with how high up it is. The mountain of stuff would have gotten in the way, so if they'd been lying down, they would have been hidden. To make the deaths of these two known to the rest of us who couldn't go inside, they would have had to hang them like this, making it visible from the outside. Was this done to get back at us for thinking that those two would surely be safe if we left the key with them? I wonder where the shutter key we gave Goda, which should have ensured their safety, is now. That key was in the pocket of his trousers. The gardening shed key had been kindly left there, and even the plate was attached. In other words, the gardening shed had been a closed room after all. Huh. And that gave rise to another question. Because this can't be explained by a hanging. If they didn't commit suicide, then those nooses were set up by the culprit. It might have been possible to shoot them through the window, but it's really unthinkable that someone could have tied two loops to the beam from the outside. And furthermore, there's no way they could have lifted up the heavy corpses. In other words, to do all of this, they would have had to go inside. But the key was in Goda's pocket, and the shutter had been locked. In other words, the gardening shed had been a closed room. Goda had said that there was only one key to this shutter. But is it possible that there was a copy, and that the culprit was in possession of it? Either way, they had to get inside, and if the only way inside is using a key, then they had to have a key, right? Meaning Goda didn't have the key, meaning he was given the wrong key? To make him think, oh, we have the key to the gardening storehouse, we're fine. Who gave him the key? That was someone in Batler's group, George. It was fucking George, wasn't it? Jesus Christ, George, you can't stop being suspicious, can you? If we're allowed to theorize that there actually was a duplicate of the gardening storehouse key, and that Goda just didn't know about it, then this isn't even close to a closed room. But why is it that, despite the fact that almost all of the other corpses were shot to death and left almost completely alone, just these two corpses were intentionally hoisted up? I couldn't help but feel something a bit odd about that. After this, if we assume that the mystery corpse in the boiler was grandfather's, the deaths of 16 people have been confirmed. There were 18 people on this island. I'm here, and there are 16 corpses. Cannon's corpse is the only one I haven't been able to confirm. But he's at the bottom of the well, which would explain a lot. Well, it wouldn't explain a lot, it would explain why you haven't seen it yet. According to Kiria, he had been killed while climbing out of the well and had fallen down into it. So with the well closed up like this, it's impossible to check. I tried shining a flashlight through the bars, down into the darkness and the depths of the well, but it seemed that the jet black darkness had no intention of showing me its depths with a light of that level. It looked like I'd have to break the bars after all. Using the hatchets and things I dragged from the boiler room and the gardening shed, I tried breaking the cover of the well. But the metal bars were extraordinarily sturdy, and breaking them wasn't easy. I hit them with the hatchet over and over, until my hands started feeling weird and eventually gave up on breaking them. It's impossible. If If they were at least wood, I might have been able to break them. But this metal... That's right, there's no way you can slice through metal bars like butter with a human strength. I can't even begin to understand that story about how cannon cut through metal bars. Oh yeah, it's a good point. I heard that a light like a red laser beam grew out of his arm, and that he sliced through the metal bars like he was cutting through butter. Cutting through metal bars like butter? And what's with the red laser beam? Does that mean he secretly had a burner on him or something? And used that to burn through the bars? Still, just what kind of laser could cut through metal bars like butter? It almost sounds like the kind of laser beam you'd find in those robot anime I loved as a kid, doesn't it? Does something like that actually exist? And how did Cannon get that laser beam? No matter how much I want to ask him, he's already been killed. Plus, even his corpse is now in the depths of the well, beyond this cover. If Cannon could slice through metal bars, I'm sure he could handle this metal cover in a single swing. It feels just like the closed room Goda was locked in while holding the key. Only one person can open the door, but they're locked inside. If only I had that power of Cannon's, I'd be able to do something about this cover myself. Just who is Cannon? He couldn't really be a non-human being capable of using a strange power, right? Kyrie told me to believe in witches, and I even met an insane woman calling herself one. Could Cannon possibly be a human on the witch's side? Or else the culprit? What the heck? Am I gonna start treating him like the culprit just because I can't find his corpse? It's at the bottom of the well! Oh, treating him like the culprit because there's no corpse? And who is the one babbling about the suspicious being innocent? Very well, I couldn't bear having you push all the crimes on Cannon and building a human culprit theory that way. I will guarantee it with the red. Cannon is dead. But this is a CG, so, yeah. Among the 5 people in Kyrie's group, he was the first to die. In short, he was the 9th victim. So, the 6 in the 6 in the dining hall. Jessica, George. But George, if he's the culprit, he couldn't have been the 8th victim, because he would have had to kill everyone else. But, of course, that matters less if Jessica and George were killed after... Jessica and George died after, Kumasawa and Goda. And if Cannon was killed before, Jessica, then that would also make sense. Unless one of the deaths in the dining hall... No, but Kinzo was dead first. Then the 6 in the dining hall. So that brings us to 7. 8 is Jessica, Cannon's 9. Okay. And if one of the deaths in the dining hall was faked, which big doubt, then Goda and Kumasawa were killed before Jessica. Since there's no corpse, I can't say for sure that Cannon is dead. So my whispering in red does not reach the PCU, but it did reach you, right? Interesting. So are we done with this investigation stuff? No? At a glance, this was a mass murder due to something strange that could only be thought of as magic. Forgot to read Cannons. There we go. Oh, Jesus. Oh, God, there's even a hole straight through him. Batwer was not able to find his corpse. No matter how he's killed with magic, without a corpse, he's a definite suspect. Now, that's definitely anti-fantasy. Therefore, I guarantee his death with the red truth. Now, that's definitely anti-mystery. So, yet again, Cannon's body has disappeared, even though it's probably just at the bottom of the well and Batwer can't get there. Cannon's certainly suspicious, even if he's already dead. At a glance, yeah, I already read that. Golden threads that attack through keyholes. Now we even have testimony that something gold flew around the dining hall when the first 6 died. The 2 might have been the same weapon. Then there was the closed room murder of the garden shed, and the laser beam that could cut metal bars. That wasn't all. There was much, much more, like the group of goat monsters. The story of a witch who could create pitfalls just by snapping her fingers. The rabbit-like demons who had fired golden threads. I think there was more, but each part was all screwed up. I couldn't possibly accept it, and was forced to suspect that it was some kind of trick or mistake. But why in the world had everyone spoken with one voice, saying the same thing without contradictions in their testimony? It's not only the magic. There's Maria's mysterious death. Why Jessica knew that George had been killed. The mysterious burnt corpse that I couldn't confirm really belonged to that damn geezer. And more and more. All stuff I don't get. I tilted the wine bottle up and gulped. I don't have a clue what's going on. After dinner last night, the kids were chased out and told to go back to the guest house. And then there was a massacre in the dining hall. Kyrie and the rest were dropped through pitfalls and captured. Then George and Jessica were called out to take a test or whatever and killed. Even though Kyrie's group was able to escape the dungeon somehow, all of them got killed in the end. And at the very, very end, even Maria was killed, leaving me all alone. In short, I did nothing except stay locked up in the guest house. During that time, a huge incident occurred and ended. What can I call it except incomprehensible? I don't have a clue anymore. Now I'm nothing but a drunk. You plan on leaving only me alive? Show yourself right away and come to kill me already. It's too much of a pain, so I won't search for you. You show me your true form yourself. I won't run or hide, so come at me with arrows or bullets or whatever. I haven't gotten any sleep since yesterday, so I'm incredibly sleepy. You want to kill me? Go ahead. I decided to return to the guest house and boldly rest in a bed. When I exited the kitchen and passed through the lobby, that portrait of the witch came into view. The big clock did too. It was almost exactly 2400. Then the sound of the bell rang out, proclaiming that 2400 had arrived. As I listened, I looked up at Beatrice's portrait. Exactly 24 hours ago, I met you. What were you trying to say? And where did you go? Just who in the world are you? Golden Witch Beatrice. I haven't solved a single one of the riddles surrounding you. Show yourself, and fight me! Interesting. Then the witch showed herself. Like a guest of honor finally appearing, she showed herself on the landing at the top of the big staircase. So, you finally show yourself. I've been kept bored for a whole day. Correct. I gave you a whole day. Was that enough for you to fully exercise the rights of the human side? Yeah, I was bored after all. I did a heck of a lot of it. Angie was a good piece. Don't you speak Angie's name. She appeared through a miracle, sacrificed herself, and gave you the tenacity required for certain victory. Don't you speak Angie's name. That brutal death was something you needed. If you hadn't seen that death, you wouldn't have grown serious. Without the wake-up call of Angie's ill-fated nature, your tenacity for victory would not have been born. I told you not to speak Angie's name! In short, she was a necessary sacrifice. Otherwise, an anger great enough to kill me would not have been born in you. The rivalry between us cannot be destroyed. Damn you, Lady Burncastle. It's more fitting to call that a trump card than a piece. No matter how much a piece acts, it does not stray from the board. But no matter how much power a trump card wields, it is always thrown away after it is used. Angie was truly a good trump card for you. Don't you speak Angie's name! At Bauer's angry roar, Beatrice finally stopped talking. You know, I don't have time to play around in a place like this anymore. Even a tie will keep Angie waiting. So I'll break through you, take my family, and go back home. I won't waste a second playing witch games with you. In that case, what should you do? You know, don't you? Yeah, I'll beat you down. I'll blast away all witches, magic, illusions, and delusions. Come on, let's get started. I won't let you trick me again. Resume the game, okay? I'll tear apart the witch's veil, concealing the outright lie you are. You talk too much. All you have to do is honestly say, I'll kill you. Yeah, if those are the words you want, I'll say them. This is the first and last wish of yours that I'll lend an ear to. I thank you. I'll kill you. Okay. Very well. Let us begin, Battler. Yes, the time for the witch hunt has come. Try and chase me. Try and corner me. Try and kill me. I expect a lot from you. Try and show me what your little sister gave you in her last moments. Bring it on! Battler's cry burned the world with a white light, and if you opened your eyes amidst the darkness, the two of them could be seen in a rose garden.